Welcome back. We're on page 431. Just finished talking about the risk utility, what the financial gain would be for my investment of risk, so to speak. So figure 11.2 on page 431 basically shows how this would kind of sort of work. Risk-averse people tend to say, I don't really want to do that. And so their payoff is generally kind of, what the potential payoff is in utility. Risk neutral people, obviously it's about the same. And risk people, they like lots of risk, but anyway, the idea is risk averse versus risk seeking. Could be a company culture, it could be an industry culture, it could be an individual culture, and that kind of sort of matters. Again, you could switch from risk seeking to risk averse at the drop of a hat. A new CEO comes in and says, "We're not doing that," and you go, phew. It's kind of hard to get that. Okay, like always, they show the processes, right? Every chapter shows the processes. So there's 6 processes associated with risk management, and we're going to go through those. So first one is the planning part. Basically how to approach this. Are there any rules, any documentation, and the output of that is going to be a risk management plan. Okay, that's what you're basically going to do. Next, you have to identify the risk. You have to make a list of the risks that are likely to occur, and then a qualitative announcement. So qualitative basically talks about figuring out like a priority of the risks. Which ones are likely or not, and that kind of, these are high risk, these are low risk kind of things. Quantitative is putting dollar signs against it, estimating the impact of those guys. And then doing the risk response plan basically talks about, and they're talking positive and negative. They talk about reducing threats, on the negative side. On the positive side, they use this really cool term to talk about enhancing opportunities. Okay, whatever. And then control, which is the one that goes through everything, and that's basically monitoring to make sure everything you said you were going to be doing is working. Okay, kind of makes sense. Okay, so at the beginning on page 433 is the planning part. So I'm supposed to be producing a risk management plan. Okay, so the risk management plan basically has this kind of stuff in it. Here's what your management plan should conclude. How will the risk management be performed? What tools are you going to use? What are the roles and responsibilities? Are you going to have somebody responsible for specific tasks? The budget and the schedule, and not the budget and the schedule for the project, the budget and schedule for doing risk management. Okay. Risk categories. What are the main categories of the risks? Risk probability and the impact. In other words, how likely it is, plus the dollar amount of the impact. Revise stakeholder tolerances, because it's possible that halfway through the project somebody could have a change of heart. So you have to maintain, and not all your stakeholders are going to have the same tolerances, right? So you kind of have to, average them all together to figure out what their tolerances are. Okay. You have to, what kind of tracking mechanism are you going to use? And then documentation. The documentation is pretty cool because once you've done this, the next time you do a project that's similar to this, you just go grab the previous one and kind of dust it off a little bit. Okay, cool. So in addition to the risk management plan, there could be some other plans that are being used. There's a bullet list on page 433 that talk about contingency plans. So for example, if there's a strike, what the heck am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to hire scab employees to come in, or am I supposed to contract out something? Am I supposed to shift manufacturing to another area? Those kind of contingency plans. A fallback plan, that kind of sort of sounds like a contingency plan, but fallback plan basically is targeted. If this occurs, this is what I'm going to do. Now let me explain how we would use a fallback plan. Let's say, for example, that I'm going to install a new version of SQL Server on a database server. I actually calculated how long it's going to take me to do this. It's going to take me about 2 hours to do. At the end of 2 hours, I need to decide, okay, am I going to continue this? Or am I going to roll back? I'm going to have a fallback plan. So my fallback plan basically means I'll do a backup of the server, and then I spend the amount of time, and if I get to some point where I go, this is just not working, I could spend another 5 hours and maybe I can get it to work. But maybe I need to execute the fallback plan where I put everything back the way it was and then spend some time later. So fallback plan is all about how to reverse what you just did. Contingency reserves. The reserve typically means money, but how much money do I have in the bank to handle a slippage in schedule, that kind of stuff. And there's another one called management reserve. So project reserves are reserves that you have. You don't have to go ask Mother Maya. They're the money that you have you set aside, your rainy day fund, that in case something happens, you can take it out of the reserve. Now the management reserve is above that. I have to go ask to tap into that money. They may have some money that if I get rid of all my reserve, I have to go ask Mother May I, can I have some of their reserve? Okay, so those are some additional plans that could happen. So on page 434, they talk about the common sources of risk. And basically, I like this because it's kind of in priority order. So they're using success, but you could kind of spin it around. Let's talk about failure. The thing that was going to get you the most, if you do not have user involvement in your IT project, in other words, you say, screw it, I know exactly what the users want here. I don't need to ask them. I'll just do it on my own, and they'll be absolutely delighted with what I provide them. Really? That's a recipe for disaster. That's number one. If the users are not involved in the project, boy, your project is going to suck. The next one is you don't have management support. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, you guys go right ahead, I never really liked this project anyway. I didn't think we should do it. That's gonna cover the entire project with people being unhappy. A clear statement of the requirements. Oh, God, yes. If you don't know what the requirements are at the beginning of the project, well, maybe not the beginning, but you go through the requirements phase, you should know exactly what it is you're supposed to be doing, and getting surprised at the end. Oh yeah, we also wanted it to do this, and you go, really? Okay, so having all the requirements up front means you're going to have success. Having new requirements sprung on you at the last minute is a recipe for disaster. Proper planning, that makes sense. Realistic expectations. Somebody says, that's a great project. I think it's worth $10,000. You're going, no. It's not going to cost $10,000. It's going to cost $20,000. Well, I think it should cost $10,000. Well, too bad. I think it should be done in 6 months. No, it's going to take a year. Competent staff, yeah. Ownership of the project, and maybe not just the project, but ownership of the processes. I forgot to make someone responsible for a particular task, and so it was going along just fine, and then finally something went wrong, and I went, well, who's supposed to be doing that thing anyway? And nobody raises their hand. You go, well, that's probably why it didn't get done. Clear vision and objectives and hard work and focused staff. That's kind of bullshit. Anyway, bottom line is this is a pretty good list of where you could get risks in a particular project. Okay, so there's a risk questionnaire, a bullet list on page 435, and basically this can kind of help you bring out some of these things. So, for example, one of them is how the market. How well is this product going to sell? I mean, do you have any idea how the market's going to react to this new product, service, device, whatever the heck it is you're doing? Financial. Can I afford to fail? I'm starting this project. Do I bet the entire company on this new product? Right? Technology. Sometimes you're so far in the bleeding edge. I always love that term instead of the leading edge. The bleeding edge is that some of the technology just isn't that mature, and sometimes it's just a bridge too far. I mean, you're trying to use the latest and greatest whatever technology, and dang stuff just don't work. And so you really should wait till that kind of matures a little bit and try again another 6 months kind of thing. People, do you have the right skills? Am I going to have to contract out some people? It could be that, your senior database person is getting ready to retire, smack dab in the middle of your project. Do you think maybe that might be a problem? Yeah. And then the structure, how is your company organized as in general, and how particularly are you organized for this one particular project? And we talked about that in previous chapters, about matrix and weak matrix and strong matrix and balanced matrix and all the rest of that stuff. Anyway, so that's kind of a good little checklist of going through, asking people, what do you think about this? And you would probably ask all the stakeholders, and you would gather all the data and maybe come up with a risk register, which we'll talk about here in just a few more minutes. So they talk about this thing called a risk breakdown structure. Okay, it looks, sounds, and feels just like a work breakdown structure. So figure 11.4. So for example, here's a particular project. Okay, and let's just look down in the technical branch of this. We've got some hardware. So I need a contingency plan of when I get the new hardware and plug it all in, the damn thing don't turn on. Okay, I need a contingency plan. The contingency plan would be, we'll borrow a server from someone else and get this thing running, and then we'll reorder a new one, or have the vendor come in or do something. Or what happens if we ran out of network capacity in the middle of the project? So this is just like a WBS, where it breaks down and breaks down and breaks down. And just like a WBS, you're making someone responsible for that risk. So in the business world, it could be competitors and suppliers and, how much cash do I have and all the rest of that stuff. Anyway, bottom line is this kind of a risk management breakdown thing is pretty cool. Okay. So, the book, because it's based upon the PMBOK, that's interesting. Anyway, the PMI is body of knowledge guy. There's the 10 10 knowledge areas. And so here's the 10 knowledge areas that are listed, and then basically what a typical risk condition. So the first one is integration, right? Inadequate planning, poor resource, poor integration, lack of management, blah, 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 blah. Scope. If I have poor scope management, or I haven't identified the scope, my work packages don't have good definitions, I'm going to have trouble. Errors in estimating, or I reduced availability, or I don't have the people, or weather delays. Cost estimate errors, don't have the right kind of productivity, quality, my workmanship is down. Human resources, I got conflicts. Communications, I don't tell people what's going on. Risk, which is of course where we're at here. Ignoring risk. Oh, that'll never happen. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Procurement, unenforceable conditions or contract clauses. Or if you have an adversarial relationship with your vendor. And then last one is lack of consultation with the stakeholders. They don't know what's going on. So the 10 knowledge areas, and then some common risk analysis. Which leads us to page 438, where we talk about identifying risks. So that's kind of a list of ones that are likely. So one thing you need to think about is risk can change over time. When you start a project, let's talk about market. I started this project, and I'm going to have the coolest, super duperest, kumquat peeler that the world has ever seen. And 3/4 of the way through my development of this kumquat peeler, I find out that someone else has just released a similar product. And I didn't know it was coming, and so now I'm in competition for someone. So the risk at the beginning of the project versus the risk in the middle, you have to go through this process iteratively to check out and see if your risk has changed. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. This seems like a good place to pause.